All right, strap in everyone, because today we are diving deep into Nostradamus. And no, I'm not talking about the surface level stuff you see in documentaries. We're going all the way down the rabbit hole, exploring his techniques, the controversies, and some really fascinating scholarly stuff.
You know what always gets me about Nostradamus is that he doesn't fit in a box, Not just a physician, not just an astrologer, he was both. And a really interesting product of the Renaissance.
It was a wild time, so much new thought.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing that Nostradamus, with his medical background, also was into astrology. And back then, that wasn't like, some weird fringe thing, right? It was practically science.
Absolutely. Tightly linked with astronomy. And we see that link in his early work, right? The almanacs, think of them like Renaissance Twitter, weather predictions, farming tips. Oh, and of course, astrological forecasts.
And they were a hit. Made him a star. People thought he could, actually see the future.
Exactly. But how did he make those cryptic prophecies that, let's be honest, have obsessed people for centuries?
Yeah, right. Like, was he just making it up as he went along? Throwing darts at a board with random words on it?
Not even close. The sources point to, get this, a systematic approach. He used, there's this technique called judicial astrology. He was comparing very meticulously the planet's positions from past events, right, to future ones. Like he was making a cosmic blueprint of destiny or something.
So he was a data guy, looking for patterns, way more methodical than I would have guessed. But wait, what about, didn't he say he went into some sort of trance? The whole poetic fury thing?
Ah, yes, poetic fury. Kind of similar to what, the ancient Greek oracles talked about, or even shamanistic traditions. Nostradamus said it was like intense concentration, meditation, prayer, seeking visions, all alone up in his attic study.
Did you imagine? The candles, the star charts, ancient books everywhere.
Talk about mood lighting. But it wasn't all just waiting for inspiration, right? He was a serious scholar, too.
That's right. Hit the books. Digging into history, biblical prophecy, he even looked at collections of, omens.
He was a big fan of Ezekiel and Daniel especially. It seems like he was paraphrasing, weaving their words into his predictions. It's almost like he was remixing ancient prophecies for the Renaissance crowd.
So he was building on tradition, adding in his own astrological insights, and then boom, encodes it all in this super cryptic language.
No wonder people have been trying to decipher his code for centuries. And, that language is key to the whole mystery, right? He wasn't writing in plain French. No, it was this blend of French, Provençal, a little Italian, Latin, even made-up words, almost like he wanted to obscure the meaning on purpose.
Which, of course, has led to endless arguments about whether his predictions were accurate. Some people say, right, he predicted it all. The French Revolution, Hitler, everything. Others say, nah, it's all just vague stuff you can twist to fit any event.
And that's where things get really interesting. Take the French Revolution. There's no quatrain that, screams French Revolution is coming. But there are verses that talk about upheaval, blood, monarchs being overthrown. And people look back and connect it.
Like one of those optical illusions, right? You see one image, then another.
You got it. The ambiguity leaves room for interpretation after the fact. But gotta acknowledge the skeptics here. They say that vagueness is why Nostradamus is so popular because, his prophecies are so open-ended, you can apply them to anything after it happens.
Like a horoscope that's so general it could apply to anyone. Like, you will have a meaningful encounter today. Well, duh. Who doesn't?
Exactly. But even the skeptics, they gotta admit, the guy's words are powerful. Those vivid images he creates, foreboding disaster, they tap into our fears and our fascinations.
Okay, so let's talk about some specific predictions that really captured people's imaginations. Probably the most chilling is the one about Hitler. What's the quatrain that people always point to?
The one that gives everyone goosebumps is the one that mentions an audacious one governing the Eastern Empire, and it also talks about the earth trembling, blood being spilled. It's easy to see why people link that to, Hitler's reign of terror and the Nazis.
Yeah, it's some scary stuff. And knowing what we know about World War II, it's not that crazy to make that connection. But what do the skeptics say about that one?
Well, they say that even this prediction, which seems pretty direct, right? It still relies on symbols and allegory that can be interpreted in many ways.
Yeah.
Eastern Empire, for example, that could refer to any number of things, not necessarily Nazi Germany.
It's like a historical Rorschach test. People see what they want to see depending on like how they understand history and what's happening in the world right now.
Exactly. It's all in how you interpret it. But even if we're, being skeptical about Nostradamus, we have to admit there's something captivating about his work. It speaks to our need to make sense of the world, to get a peek at the future, to believe that, there's some order to all this chaos.
Speaking of chaos, what about the atomic bomb? Did Nostradamus back in the 16th century somehow see this world-changing event coming?
There are a few quatrains people bring up, usually ones talking about fire from the sky, great destruction, cities turn to dust. It's that ambiguity again, right? Did he actually have a vision of mushroom clouds? Or was he just describing war in the way people understood it back then? It's debatable.
It's almost like he's tapping into those deep, primal fears.
Yeah.
The worries about civilization collapsing, fears that are even stronger now after the atomic age.
Absolutely. And it's that ability to tap into those collective anxieties, hopes, uncertainties about the future. That's what makes Nostradamus so fascinating, even now.
And it's not all doom and gloom with him, is it? The sources mention he also wrote about spiritual awakenings, times of peace and prosperity. That history repeats itself.
You're right. Remember, he was a man of his time. And the Renaissance, it was all about rebirth and renewal. It wasn't just about predicting the end of the world. He saw the potential for positive change, for us to evolve and overcome challenges.
So not just a prophet of doom, but someone who imagined a better future too. That adds another wrinkle to this whole Nostradamus dilemma, doesn't it? Was he really a seer, just really good at being vague? Or maybe a little bit of both?
$1,000,000 question, right? And it's one we're going to keep wrestling with as we explore more of his prophecies and how they've affected history and culture.
Okay, so we're back, still trying to figure out this whole Nostradamus dilemma. Was he a true seer? Really good at being vague? Or maybe both? It's a question that people have been asking for centuries, and it's affected everything from politics to pop culture.
What's really striking is that Nostradamus, his influence goes way beyond just prophecy, right? His name is basically like synonymous with predicting the future. That just shows how powerful his work is, even if you don't believe he could actually see what's coming.
Totally. Even if you think his predictions are vague and open to interpretation, you can't deny he's become part of our collective imagination. Just hearing his name, you think of those cryptic verses, like shadowy figures and glimpses into the future.
And that imagery. People have used it for all sorts of things. The sources mention, get this, political propaganda during World War II.
Whoa, really? How does a 16th century prophet get mixed up in 20th century warfare?
It seems that, while both sides, the Allies and the Axis, they were desperate, right? They wanted to sway public opinion, boost morale, so they basically cherry-picked Nostradamus's verses, reinterpreted them to fit their own story.
So Nostradamus, the propaganda tool? That's a little different from, a lone prophet writing by candlelight.
I know, right? Shows you how, flexible his prophecies are, how easy it is to mold them to fit different agendas. But it's not just politics. Nostradamus is everywhere in pop culture. We're talking books, movies, documentaries. Remember those late-night TV specials?
Oh, yeah. With the dramatic music and, the super serious voiceover. They always focus on the apocalyptic stuff, the doom and gloom. Do any of them actually, seriously analyze his work?
Some do, but a lot of them, they just play up the mystery, the intrigue. Nostradamus has become, a brand, a cultural icon. His name alone sells books and documentaries.
And speaking of brands, it feels like he's making a comeback lately, especially online. Every time something big happens in the world, people go digging through their copies of less prophecies looking for clues.
It's funny, isn't it? Nostradamus' popularity goes in cycles. Whenever things feel uncertain, like there's a crisis or big change coming, people turn to his prophecies, looking for answers or maybe just a way to understand the chaos.
It's like, even though it's a little unsettling, it's comforting to think, well, it was all predicted. But the skeptics, they must be having a field day with all of this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They love to point out how vague his writings are, how he uses symbols and allegories so you can interpret them in a million ways. They say that lack of specificity is why he's still relevant today. Like blank canvases we can project our own fears and hopes onto.
It's like those fortune cookies, the ones with those generic sayings that could apply to anyone. You will embark on a new adventure. Well, yeah, who doesn't at some point?
Exactly. But even if we're being skeptical, you have to admit there's something about Nostradamus that draws you in. He speaks to that basic human desire, right? To make sense of the world, to find patterns in all the chaos, to believe there's some bigger story guiding our lives.
It's like that age-old search for meaning, trying to figure out where we fit in. And maybe Nostradamus, whether he meant to or not, gives us a framework for that search, even if it's, a bit elusive.
You've hit the nail on the head. It doesn't matter if we believe he could actually see the future. Nostradamus makes us think about the big questions. He makes us consider all the possibilities, good and bad. And he reminds us that history repeats itself.
So even if he wasn't predicting specific events, down to the last detail, his work is still valuable. It makes us think about history, the things that are happening now, and how we're shaping the future.
Exactly. He's like a mirror, reflecting back at us all our anxieties, our dreams, our uncertainties about what's to come. We look at his prophecies and we see ourselves, our fears and hopes playing out on the stage of history.
That's a powerful image. Nostradamus as a mirror, showing us not just events, but the very essence of what it means to be human.
And I think that's a big part of why we're still fascinated by him. He speaks to something deep inside us, that need to understand where we belong in the universe, to find meaning when things are uncertain, to face the forces that shape our destinies, whether we can see them or not.
Okay, so we've talked about Nostradamus, the physician, the astrologer, the master of ambiguity, the cultural icon. But who was the man himself? Can we learn anything about his personality, his motivations, from history?
Historians and scholars have been trying to figure that out for centuries. I mean, we're talking about someone who lived over 500 years ago. His life is shrouded in legend and speculation. But there are some clues, things we can piece together from his writings and the historical context.
The sources mentioned that he was, really affected by the plague outbreaks that were devastating Europe during his lifetime. He saw the suffering and death firsthand.
And we can't underestimate the impact the plague had on people back then. Imagine whole communities wiped out, fear and panic everywhere. It's not surprising that Nostradamus, as a doctor facing that reality, would turn to prophecy, trying to understand the forces controlling life and death.
It's like he was searching for meaning in all the chaos, trying to create some order in a world that felt like it was falling apart.
And remember, it wasn't just the plague. He lived through a time of incredible social and religious upheaval. The Renaissance was challenging old ways of thinking, the Reformation was dividing the church, and Europe was constantly at war. There was political intrigue everywhere.
So he was a man living on the edge of a changing world, facing all that complexity. And maybe his prophecies, in a way, reflect that tension, that sense of hope, but also anxiety about the future.
I think you're right. Nostradamus wasn't just observing from a distance. He was right in the middle of it all. He was a scholar, a physician, a man of faith. But he also questioned things, explored the boundaries of knowledge and belief.
And in a way, he's still challenging us to do the same, even now. He's making us wrestle with those big questions, consider all the possibilities, and recognize that history repeats itself.
He's a reminder that the future isn't set in stone. We create it through our choices and actions.
And that's a powerful message, whether we believe he could literally see the future or not. Nostradamus encourages us to learn from the past, to pay attention to what's happening now, and to take responsibility for the future we're building.
That's it. And maybe that's his most enduring legacy, to awaken in us that sense of wonder, that desire to learn, and that willingness to face the mysteries that are part of being human.
Welcome back for the final part of our Nostradamus deep dive. So we've explored his life, his methods, his prophecies, and how he's influenced culture. But now for the big question, the Nostradamus paradox.
Yeah.
Was he a real visionary or just really good at being ambiguous?
Yeah, it's the question, isn't it? It's what's kept scholars and, well, just people fascinated for centuries. We've looked at the evidence, tried to decode those cryptic quatrains, explored what the believers and the skeptics think.
And I've got to say, this has been a wild ride. I've gone back and forth, amazed 1 minute, skeptical the next, intrigued by the possibilities, but also, hesitant to jump to conclusions.
Yeah.
What about you? Where do you stand on this whole debate after all this?
Well, if we're talking about Nostradamus predicting specific events, with total accuracy and clarity, I'd say the evidence is more suggestive, not really conclusive. That poetic language, the symbolism, the historical context, it all adds up to this tapestry of meaning that honestly could be interpreted in a million ways.
It's like we've been putting together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing. So we're using our intuition, our imagination, to fill in the gaps. And as we've talked about, those gaps can be filled with whatever fits our own beliefs, our own anxieties.
That's Nostradamus for you. The allure and the frustration. His prophecies are they're like those old oracles. They invite us to project our own interpretations onto them. They're mirrors, showing us our collective anxieties, our dreams, what we fear and hope for in the future.
So maybe the real question isn't whether he could literally see the future. Maybe it's about what his work tells us about being human, about how fascinated we are with the unknown, that constant search for meaning.
You got it. Nostradamus, whether he meant to or not, he tapped into something, those deep human anxieties, war, plague, upheaval, things that have haunted us forever. And he gave those anxieties a voice, shaped them into these poetic verses that have echoed through time.
Like he was making a map of human fear, a guide to all the anxieties that are always there just below the surface.
And right alongside those fears, he also put forth hope for peace, for spiritual renewal, for a future where humanity, rises above its limitations and reaches its full potential.
So it's not just about predicting doom and gloom. It's about imagining a better future, one where we overcome challenges and achieve great things.
Exactly, and that's what's so amazing about Nostradamus. He gives us this kaleidoscope of possibilities, a tapestry woven with darkness and light, fear and hope, destruction and renewal.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure prophecy. He's inviting us to think about the paths we might take, the choices we face, and what might happen as a result.
And maybe that's the most important lesson we can take from Nostradamus. Whether we believe he could actually see the future or not, he's pushing us to engage with the past, to be aware of what's shaping our world today, and to take responsibility for the future we're creating.
He's reminding us that the future isn't fixed. It's a blank canvas, and we're the ones painting it through the choices we make.
And in a world like ours, with all its challenges and possibilities, that message is more important than ever. Nostradamus, with those mysterious verses and his lasting legacy, he's challenging us to wake up to the power of our choices, to face the complexities of our time, to build a future worthy of, what it means to be human.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our Nostradamus journey. It's been a fascinating trip through history, prophecy, and the mysteries of the human mind.
It really has, and we've just scratched the surface. There's so much more to this enigmatic figure.
So, to everyone listening, as we navigate this complex, ever-changing world, may Nostradamus' legacy inspire us. May it make us curious, make us think critically, and keep that sense of wonder alive. And may we always remember, the power to shape our destiny isn't about predicting the future. It's about embracing the possibilities and making choices that reflect our greatest aspirations. Thanks for joining us.